The dog stopped dead in the middle of the diner and stared at her like it had just found a ghost. Not growling, not barking, just sitting perfectly still, its golden brown and black body rigid, its dark eyes locked onto the young waitress behind the counter like it had been searching for her for years. Because it had. The woman's hands went cold around the coffee pot. Her breathing stopped for exactly 2 seconds. 3 years of silence. 3 years of hiding. 3 years of building a life no one was supposed to find. And a military dog had just ended all of it in under 30 seconds. If this story grabs you from the very first second, hit that subscribe button right now and follow this story all the way to the end. And drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see exactly how far this story has traveled. The town of Millhaven, Kentucky didn't ask questions. That was the first thing Maya Hartwell had noticed when she arrived 3 years ago carrying one duffel bag and a name that wasn't hers. People here worked long hours, went home tired, and minded their own business. The diner on Route 9 was exactly the kind of place where a person could disappear in plain sight. Busy enough that no one paid attention. Quiet enough that nothing unusual ever happened. Maya had been counting on both of those things every single day for 3 years. She was 22 years old with long dark brown hair she kept tied back during shifts and let fall loose on the walk to her car afterward. She wore the standard diner uniform during work hours, but underneath it, the same habits she had carried out of the military lived in her muscles, whether she liked it or not. The way she stood. The way she cataloged every person who walked through the door in the first 3 seconds. The way her eyes found exits before they found anything else. She had tried to stop doing those things. She hadn't managed it yet. Maya, table 4 needs a refill. That was Linda, the morning shift supervisor, calling from across the counter without looking up from her order pad. Already on it, Maya said, and she was already moving. She poured coffee. She smiled at the right moments. She kept conversations short and warm and forgettable the way she had trained herself to. To everyone inside that diner, she was just a young woman working hard, saving money, keeping to herself. Nobody dug deeper than that. Nobody wanted to. Nobody had until that Tuesday morning. The door opened at 8:41 a.m., and Maya noticed it immediately, the way she noticed everything immediately, before she understood why her stomach had tightened. A man walked in. Late 40s. Military posture so embedded it had become the way he simply existed in the world. His left hand gripped a metal crutch. His pant leg on the right side was pinned neatly above the knee. And beside him, moving with the kind of disciplined calm that separated trained military animals from everything else, was a German shepherd. Golden brown and black fur, broad shoulders, a black tactical harness with a small white patch stitched onto the side that read U.S. Military Service K9. Maya looked at the dog for exactly 1 second longer than she should have. She turned away, picked up another coffee pot, started moving toward the far end of the counter. Behind her, she heard the man ask the nearest booth if he could sit down. She heard the brief hesitation in the answer. She didn't turn around because she already knew what was happening, and she told herself it wasn't her problem, and she kept walking. Then she heard the next table do the same thing. Then the one after that. She stopped walking. She stood at the far end of the counter with her back to the room, and her jaw tight, because she had been in enough difficult situations to know when she was fighting herself. And right now she was fighting herself hard and losing. She turned around. The veteran was standing near the center of the diner. His expression hadn't changed. Patient. Quiet. He had clearly been turned away 4 times, and he hadn't raised his voice once. He shifted his weight on the crutch and looked toward the next table, and the couple sitting there suddenly found something very interesting to look at outside the window. The German shepherd stayed beside him. Still, watchful. Its dark eyes moved steadily across the room in short, controlled sweeps. Maya set down her coffee pot. "Sir?" Her voice came out steady, clear. "There's a seat at the counter if you want it." The veteran turned toward her. Something in his expression shifted. Not gratitude exactly, but recognition. The recognition of one person who understood difficulty, seeing it in another. "Thank you," he said quietly, and he moved toward the counter. The German Shepherd walked beside him without needing a command. Maya placed a mug in front of the empty stool. "Coffee, please," she poured. The veteran settled onto the stool, resting the crutch against the counter. The dog positioned itself beside him, sitting upright, its gaze moving slowly around the diner. Calm, professional, thorough. Maya moved away to refill 2 other mugs at the far end. She could feel Linda watching her from across the room, with the kind of expression that meant she thought Maya had just made someone else's morning slightly more complicated. Maya ignored it. She kept moving, but she also kept watching the dog. Because something about the way the animal was moving its head wasn't right. Not random observation, not simple alertness. It was systematic, methodical. The kind of search pattern she had seen trained K9 units run during target confirmation exercises. The dog wasn't observing the diner. It was looking for something specific. "His name is Rex," the veteran said from down the counter. Maya looked up. "Sorry, the dog." The veteran wrapped both hands around his mug. "He's been with me about 18 months, but he wasn't always mine. He came out of a classified unit, one of those programs they don't put in the public records." Maya kept her face easy and open and completely uninterested. "That right?" "Yeah." The veteran took a slow sip of coffee. "Handlers from those programs, they train the dogs differently. Different command structure, different recognition protocols." He paused. "Means Rex can still identify people he was trained to recognize even years later." Maya put the coffee pot down on the warmer behind her. "Dogs are smart." "They are." The veteran's eyes hadn't moved from his mug. "He hasn't stopped scanning since we walked in." The room around them had softened slightly. The morning rush was thinning. 2 truck drivers near the window were on their second cups, arguing about a football trade. The cook was running plates to the last occupied booths. Linda had disappeared into the back, and Rex had stopped scanning. Maya realized it a half-second before she fully understood what it meant. The dog had stopped scanning because it had found what it was looking for. It was sitting perfectly still at the base of the counter stool, its body angled forward, its dark eyes fixed entirely on her. Not on the room, not on the door, on her. Maya's hands were very still on the counter surface. "Your dog okay?" The veteran turned to look at Rex, then back at Maya. His expression had changed. Not dramatically, just enough. "He does that when he recognizes someone." "He doesn't know me." "He acts like he does." "Animals pick up on things," Maya said. "Body language, stress hormones. I've got a long shift. Probably seems tense to him." The veteran was quiet for a moment. "You ever work around military facilities?" There it was. The question dropped into the air between them, and Maya heard the half-second pause in her own chest before her mouth answered. "No, never." Too fast. She heard it herself. The veteran heard it too. His fingers turned his mug slowly on the counter. "Interesting. Because the way you're standing right now, the way your eyes moved to the rear exit about 40 seconds ago without your head turning, that's not something you pick up waiting tables." "I've moved around a lot," Maya said. "Doing what?" "Different things." The veteran nodded slowly. He wasn't pushing. He wasn't confrontational. He was simply asking in the patient, unhurried way of someone who had spent years in situations where the wrong pressure at the wrong moment got people killed. "Rex worked with a combatmedic unit overseas," he said finally, "specifically with the handlers who developed the K9 classification protocols." Maya picked up a rag and began wiping down the counter surface near the register. Her hands moved evenly. Her breathing was controlled, but something in her chest had tightened to a point that was starting to feel like it might stay that way. "He still carries the scent association from that unit," the veteran continued. "Antiseptics, specific field kit compounds, the oils from tactical harness webbing." He looked at the dog. Rex had not moved. "He only reacts that way for one person." "I'm not a medic," Maya said. "I didn't say medic." She stopped wiping the counter. The veteran looked up at her directly now. The program Rex came from. The handlers who designed his protocols. There was one name that came up in the briefing documents. Not a rank. Not a service number. Just a call sign. He paused. Phoenix 1. The rag in Maya's hand went still. Outside across the parking lot, a car door slammed. Rex's head turned sharply toward the front windows. The veteran's posture changed. Subtle, almost invisible. But Maya saw it because she had been trained to see exactly that kind of shift the moment a person's body recognizes danger before their mind has finished processing it. A black SUV had pulled into the parking lot. Then a second one. Then a third. They stopped in precise formation. Too precise. The kind of spacing that told anyone who knew what they were looking at exactly who had trained these drivers and what kind of unit they came from. Rex stood up. The dog's body was low. Its ears pressed forward. A sound came from somewhere deep in its chest, barely audible, more vibration than noise, and every single person in the diner who heard it went quiet without entirely understanding why. Maya didn't move. She was watching the doors of the SUVs open. 3 men stepped out of the first vehicle, dark clothing, short hair. Their eyes went to the diner windows, immediately scanning the interior the way you scanned any potential entry point before approaching it. Friends of yours? The veteran asked quietly. No, Maya said. They seem to know where you are. Maya's jaw tightened. How long have you been in this town? The veteran looked at her. About an hour. And before that, he was quiet for exactly 1 second. I was following Rex. Maya looked at him, then at the dog, then at the men moving toward the diner entrance. She had spent 3 years building a life that was supposed to be invisible. She had changed her name, changed her appearance, taken the most anonymous job in the most anonymous town she could find. She had not contacted anyone from her former life. She had not accessed any system connected to her real identity. She had been careful in ways that most people would have found exhausting, and she had maintained that carefulness every single day without a single break. And a dog had found her anyway. Because that was the part no one had told her when she ran. The dogs would always remember. The diner door opened, and the first man stepped inside. He was followed immediately by the second, and then the third. They moved to positions near the entrance and the side wall, without speaking, without looking at each other, the coordinated silence of a team that had rehearsed this. Then the door opened again. And the man who walked in was not a soldier. He was older, silver-haired, a long dark coat, the kind of quiet absolute authority that didn't need a uniform to announce itself. He walked to the center of the diner, stopped and looked directly at the counter, directly at Maya. The veteran's hand had moved toward his side. Old muscle memory reaching for something that wasn't there. Rex's growl deepened by 1 degree. The man's eyes stayed on Maya's face. Steady, certain. The expression of someone who had been looking for something for a very long time and had just confirmed it was exactly where they expected. He spoke 2 words, quiet enough that only the counter heard them. Phoenix 1. Maya did not move. She did not answer. She did not look away. But somewhere in her chest, behind 3 years of silence and distance and careful, exhausting invisibility, something that had been locked away cracked open just slightly, because the man standing in her diner knew exactly who she was. And by the look in his eyes, he had not come alone, and he had not come for a simple conversation. Rex sat down beside her stool and pressed his shoulder firmly against her leg, the way military working dogs pressed against their handlers when the situation reached the point where instinct mattered more than commands. Maya looked down at the dog. The dog looked up at her. 3 years of running, and the animal had walked through the door and ended it in less than an hour. The man in the dark coat took 1 slow step forward, and Maya Hartwell, who had once been Phoenix 1, who had once commanded a classified K-9 unit inside one of the most dangerous programs the Navy had ever quietly buried, who had survived things that most people in this diner would not have believed possible, stood behind the counter of a roadside diner in Mill Haven, Kentucky, and waited to hear exactly what kind of trouble had just walked into her carefully constructed silence. Because whatever it was bigger than a reunion. She could feel it already, and so could Rex. His name was Colonel Warren Dex, retired, and he said it like it was supposed to mean something to her. It did. She just wasn't going to let him see that. "I don't know that name," Maya said. The colonel's expression didn't change. He had the kind of face that had stopped reacting to lies a long time ago. "Yes, you do. And you know why I'm here. I know you walked into my diner with 3 armed men and said a name I don't answer to anymore." Maya kept her voice flat. "That's all I know." The veteran on the stool hadn't moved. He was watching the colonel with the careful attention of someone trying to read a situation he had walked into by accident and now wasn't sure he could walk out of cleanly. Rex was still pressed against Maya's leg. The dog's breathing had slowed to something measured and deliberate, the kind of calm that wasn't relaxed. It was ready. The colonel took another step toward the counter. One of his men near the wall shifted slightly, and the veteran's hand moved again to that same empty space at his side. Old reflex. Honest reflex. "You can relax," the colonel said to the veteran without looking at him. "Nobody here is a threat to you." "That's usually what people say right before they become a threat," the veteran said. The colonel almost smiled. Then he looked back at Maya. 3 years is a long time to run." "I wasn't running," she said. "I resigned." "You disappeared." "Same thing." "It isn't." The colonel placed both hands flat on the counter. Not aggressive, deliberate. The posture of a man making a point without raising his voice. "You didn't file exit paperwork. You didn't complete your debrief. You walked away from a classified program in the middle of an active operational phase and vanished." He paused. "That's not a resignation, Maya. That's desertion." The word landed in this room like something physical. The veteran looked at Maya. She didn't look back at him. Her eyes stayed on the colonel, and her jaw was tight, and her hands were perfectly still on the counter surface, and the only thing moving anywhere on her body were her eyes calculating, measuring the same way they had been calculating and measuring every room she had walked into for 3 years. "Say that word to me again," she said quietly, "and this conversation is over." The colonel studied her for a moment. Then he nodded once, accepting the boundary. "All right. Then let me tell you why I'm here. Please." He reached into his coat and removed a tablet. He turned it to face her. On the screen was a photograph of a military installation. Aerial view. She recognized the layout in under 2 seconds, and her stomach dropped because she had spent 14 months of her life inside those fences. "Crestfield," she said. "Crestfield," he confirmed. "Or what's left of it." She looked at the photograph more carefully. 3 of the eastern structures were gone. Not damaged, gone. The kind of erasure that came from precise, deliberate demolition, not accident. "When?" she asked. 11 days ago. "Casualties. 4 confirmed, 7 missing." He swiped to a second image. The K9 kennels were emptied before the demolition. Every animal removed. Every training record stripped from the database. The entire classification archive for the Phoenix program deleted. Maya's hands finally moved. She pulled them back from the counter and crossed them over her chest. "Someone was cleaning house. Someone was taking inventory," the colonel corrected. "There's a difference. Cleaning house means they wanted it gone. Taking inventory means they wanted to move it somewhere else." Rex made a low sound, not a growl. Something quieter than that. Maya looked down at the dog without thinking the same automatic glance she had given her animals 1,000 times when they were trying to tell her something her brain hadn't caught up to yet. "The dogs," she said. 14 military working K9 units from the Phoenix program. All removed from Crestfield before the demolition. All currently unaccounted for. The veteran spoke from the stool. "Someone stole 14 military dogs. Someone relocated 14 highly classified, specifically trained military assets," the colonel said. "And the person who did it knew the Phoenix command protocols well enough to move all 14 animals without a single incident." Maya felt the pull of that sentence before she fully processed it. The dogs responded to whoever took them. Voluntarily. Calmly. Not a single animal showed distress markers on the surveillance footage that survived the demolition. The colonel looked at her steadily. There are exactly 3 people alive who know the Phoenix command structure well enough to manage 14 units simultaneously without force. The diner had gone very quiet around them. The 2 truck drivers near the window had long since stopped arguing about football. The cook had appeared in the kitchen doorway and then disappeared again. Linda had not come back from the supply room. The room felt smaller than it had an hour ago. "Who are the other 2?" Maya asked. "Captain Ellis Garrow. He's been under protective custody at a naval facility in Virginia since last Thursday." The colonel swiped to a third image on the tablet. A hospital room. A man in a bed with monitors attached and 2 armed guards visible at the door. Someone tried to reach him 4 days ago. They didn't succeed. "And the third person?" The colonel said nothing. Maya stared at him. Then she understood. "You don't know. We have a name. We don't have a location." "Who?" "Lieutenant Commander Daniel Voss, former program director. He dropped off the intelligence grid 8 months ago." The colonel held her gaze. Right around the same time the first Phoenix training documents started appearing on classified dark web exchanges. The veteran set down his coffee mug very carefully. "Someone's selling the program, piece by piece," the colonel said. "Training methodology, command architecture, K9 behavioral conditioning protocols, all of it. And whoever is buying it has enough funding and enough operational infrastructure to act on it within weeks, not months." Maya's voice had gone quiet. "What do they want the dogs for?" "What would you use 14 specially conditioned military K9 units for if you had no ethical constraints and unlimited resources?" She didn't answer because the answer was obvious, and saying it out loud would make it more real than she wanted it to be right now. The colonel answered for her. "The Phoenix dogs aren't just trained for detection or apprehension. You know what they were trained for. You built half those protocols yourself." "I was 20 years old when I built those protocols," she said sharply. "I didn't fully understand what I was building." "And when you did understand, you left." The silence after that was different from the silence before it. Heavier. The colonel wasn't pressing. He was simply holding space for the truth to sit in, and the truth was sitting in it very uncomfortably. Rex pressed harder against her leg. Maya looked down at the dog again. His eyes were on her face. Patient. Waiting. The same way he had looked at her from the moment he recognized her, not with urgency, not with demand, just with the complete, unquestioning trust of an animal that had been trained to follow one person's judgment above everything else. She had spent 3 years trying to forget what that felt like. She had not succeeded at that either. "What do you need from me?" she asked. The colonel's expression shifted by exactly 1 degree. Relief barely visible, the relief of a man who had not been entirely certain this conversation was going to go anywhere useful. "We need you to help us find Voss before he completes the transfer." "How close is he to completing it?" "Our analysts estimate 72 hours, possibly less." The veteran whistled low under his breath. "That's not a lot of time." "No," the colonel said. "It isn't." Maya turned and walked to the end of the counter. She stood there with her back to the room for a moment, which was something she almost never did, but she needed 3 seconds where nobody could read her face. She took them. Then she turned back around. Where did the trail go cold? Memphis, a warehouse district near the river. Surveillance caught one of the Phoenix vehicles moving through the area 6 days ago. By the time our team reached the location, it was empty. But there was a dog kennel. 14 stalls. All recently used. They moved again. Within hours of our arrival. Which means either they have someone watching our operational communications, or they have someone inside our task force. The veteran looked up sharply. "You've got a leak." "We believe so, yes." "And you came to her," the veteran said slowly, working it through out loud, "because she's the one person connected to this program who isn't in your system anymore." The colonel nodded. "She's the only asset we have who can't be compromised by whoever is watching our network." Maya walked back to the counter. She looked at the colonel directly. You said 3 people know the command protocols. You've got Garrow locked down. Voss is the one selling the program, which means the dogs that were taken responded to Voss when he moved them. She paused. But they'll respond to me too. Yes. You want to use me to pull the dogs away from him. We want to use you to locate him. The dogs are the connection. Wherever those 14 animals are, Voss isn't far. The colonel held her gaze. And Rex can track Phoenix-trained K9 units. The scent conditioning from the program is specific enough that he can follow it even weeks after the fact. Maya looked at Rex. Rex looked at her. You've been planning this since before you walked into my diner, she said to the colonel. We've been building toward it for 3 months. And you used him. She looked at the veteran to find me. The veteran's jaw tightened. I didn't know that's what I was doing. I know, she said quietly. She didn't say it with anger. She said it with the particular exhaustion of someone who understood exactly how these things worked, how information got moved around people instead of through them, how operations got built inside other people's lives without asking permission. She had done it herself, a long time ago. The colonel reached into his coat and placed a small identification folder on the counter. Temporary reinstatement. Full immunity for the disappearance. All records related to your exit from the program will be reclassified as an authorized covert withdrawal. She didn't touch the folder. I'm not doing it for the paperwork, she said. I know. I'm doing it because 14 dogs are out there with someone who is going to sell them to people who will use them to hurt civilians. Her voice didn't rise. It got quieter. The particular quiet of someone who meant every syllable exactly as much as it sounded. And because I built the protocols that made those animals what they are, and that means what happens to them is my responsibility. The colonel nodded slowly. That's why you're the right person for this. No, Maya said. That's why I'm the only person for this. She looked at the veteran. What's your name? He met her eyes. Marcus. Marcus Webb. You said you still shoot when necessary. I do. She looked at his crutch, then back at his face, and she didn't look at the crutch again because she had been in enough operational environments to know that the crutch was the least important piece of information about him. You're coming with us, she said. Marcus blinked. I walked in here for coffee. And Rex found me, which means you're already part of this whether either of us planned it. She reached under the counter and untied her apron. She folded it once and placed it on the counter next to the colonel's identification folder. Rex stood up immediately. The dog's posture changed in the space of half a second. Not relaxed, not searching. Focused. The clean, directed energy of a working animal that had just received a signal it had been waiting years to feel again. 72 hours, Maya said to the colonel. At most. She came around the counter. She crouched in front of Rex and held the dog's face in both hands for just a moment, looking into his dark eyes, and something passed between them that didn't need words and didn't need explanation. Then she stood up. Then we leave now, she said. Because wherever Voss is, he already knows you found me. She looked at the colonel steadily, and if he knows that he just moved his timeline up. The colonel's phone buzzed in his coat pocket. He pulled it out, read the screen. His expression went flat in a way that confirmed exactly what she had just said. Memphis Warehouse District, he said quietly. We just got a signal. One of the Phoenix dogs triggered a perimeter sensor at a freight depot 12 miles from the last location. Marcus was already standing, crutch under his arm, the particular readiness of a man whose body had never entirely stopped being a soldier's body. Maya walked toward the door. The diner owner stepped into her path from the side hallway, his face somewhere between confused and resigned. He looked at her, then at the colonel, then at the 3 agents, then at Rex. You're leaving, he said. I'm sorry about the shift, she said. He looked at her for a long moment. Not angry. Something closer to the expression of a man who had always suspected the quiet young woman working his counter was more complicated than she looked, and was now watching that suspicion confirm itself in real time. "You coming back?" he asked. Maya glanced at Marcus, then at the colonel, then at Rex, who was already at the door looking back at her with that patient, unblinking attention. "I don't know," she said honestly, and she pushed the door open and walked out into the morning air. Behind her, Rex followed without being called. He had been waiting 3 years for this moment, so in ways she hadn't admitted to herself until right now, had she? The freight depot smelled like diesel and river water, and something underneath both of those things that Rex identified before any human in the vehicle did. The German shepherd's head came up sharply from the back seat. His nostrils worked fast. Then he made a sound, not a bark, not a growl, something in between the specific vocalization Maya had heard him make exactly once before 3 years ago, the last time he had been close to another Phoenix-trained animal. "He's got something," Marcus said from the passenger seat. "I know," Maya said. She was already scanning the exterior of the depot through the windshield. 3 loading bays, 2 visible entry points. A secondary structure behind the main building, newer construction added after the original blueprints would have been filed. "Colonel, that back structure wasn't on your satellite image." The colonel looked from the back seat. "It wasn't there 6 days ago. Odd. It's there now." Maya kept her voice level. "And it went up fast, which means it wasn't built for storage. It was built for containment." She looked at Rex. "How many?" The dog turned toward the back structure and held the direction like a compass needle finding north. "He's pointing at the secondary building," Marcus said. "All 14 are in there," Maya said. "Or close to it." One of the colonel's agents, a younger man named Price, who had said almost nothing since Millhaven leaned forward from the rear seat. "How can you know that from one dog's reaction?" "Because Rex isn't reacting to one animal," Maya said. "The way he's holding that position, that's a group scent. Multiple Phoenix units in the same space." She looked at Price directly. "I designed the scent conditioning protocol. I know what the response looks like." Price sat back. The colonel's phone buzzed. He looked at it. His jaw tightened by 1 degree. "Garrow just lost his protective detail." The vehicle went silent. Marcus turned around slowly. "Lost how?" "2 agents down at the Virginia facility. Garrow is unaccounted for." The colonel's voice stayed professional, but the weight behind it had shifted. "Whoever is inside our communications just acted on the information that we found, Maya. They're closing loose ends." "Garrow isn't a loose end," Maya said sharply. "He's a confirmation. If they have him, they can verify the command protocols are complete without needing me." She turned to face the colonel fully. "Which means Voss doesn't need to wait for his buyer anymore. He has everything he needs right now." "Then we're already behind," Marcus said. "We've been behind since we left the diner." Maya opened the vehicle door. "Rex, come." The dog was out before she finished saying it. She heard the colonel behind her say something to Price about radio silence and perimeter positioning, and then Marcus was beside her, moving with that particular efficiency of a man who had learned to compensate for physical limitation without letting it slow his operational instinct. And the 3 of them moved toward the depot entrance without waiting for a full tactical plan, because there wasn't time for a full tactical plan, and Maya had spent enough years operating in environments where time didn't cooperate to know that sometimes you moved on what you knew and adjusted to what you found. What she found inside the main depot was not what she expected. It was empty. Not abandoned. Empty. Deliberately, recently, carefully cleared. Tables had been pushed to the walls. Equipment cases stacked and sealed. The kind of organized withdrawal that happened when someone with military training had 40 minutes and a specific checklist. "They knew we were coming," Price said from the doorway. "They've known since the colonel's phone received that depot signal," Maya said. She was moving through the space quickly, her eyes reading the room the way she had been trained to read rooms, not for what was there, but for what had been there. That signal wasn't a perimeter breach. It was a flag. She stopped. "Someone on your team sent us here on purpose." The colonel stiffened. "That's a significant accusation. It's an observation." She pointed to the floor near the central table. Those are kennel drag marks, fresh. The dogs were here within the last 3 hours. Someone moved them the moment your team flagged this location. She looked at him. The only way that happens that fast is if the person who flagged it also told Voss we were coming. Marcus had moved to the far wall. He crouched down carefully beside a piece of equipment that had been left behind, the only item in the otherwise cleared space. He picked it up, turned it over. "Maya," he said. She crossed the room. He held it up, a small metal tag, the kind attached to military K9 harnesses for unit identification. The engraving on the face read PHX-07. Rex made a sound beside her. "That's Harlow's tag," Maya said quietly. Marcus looked at her. "Harlow, PHX-07, female shepherd, 4 years old." Maya's voice had changed, something underneath it that wasn't there before. "She was the youngest animal in the program. I trained her from 8 weeks. She took the tag from Marcus and held it for a moment. "This was left here deliberately. Voss knows I'm here. He's telling me he has her." "It's a taunt," Price said from the doorway. "It's a leash," Maya said. "He's not taunting me. He's redirecting me." She looked at the colonel. "He knows I won't walk away from the dogs now that I know they're being used as leverage. He's banking on that." "And is he right?" the colonel asked. Maya didn't answer immediately. She looked at Rex. The dog was watching her with that same patient attention, waiting, not pushing, simply present the way he had been present since the moment he found her. "Where does Voss have infrastructure in this region?" she asked the colonel. "Not safe houses, not transit points. Somewhere he could hold 14 animals for more than 48 hours. Somewhere with utilities, climate control, enough space." The colonel pulled out his tablet. He scrolled, stopped. "There's a decommissioned naval training annex, 40 miles east. It's been off the active roster for 2 years, but the utility connections were never fully severed." "Naval," Marcus said. "He'd have the access codes." "He'd have the original access codes," Maya said. "But the Phoenix program ran 2 facility upgrades in the last 18 months of operation. The access architecture changed both times." She paused. "I ran the second upgrade." The colonel looked at her. "You know the current access protocols?" "I know the protocols from 3 years ago. They may have rotated. Our intelligence suggests the annex has been operating on emergency static codes since decommission. Budget cuts. Nobody prioritized the rotation." Maya moved toward the door. "Then that's where he is." The drive took 31 minutes, and nobody talked for most of it. Rex sat pressed against Maya's side in the back seat, his breathing slow and even, and twice she felt his head turn and press firmly against her arm, the way he had pressed against her leg in the diner. The animal's version of contact that wasn't comfort exactly, but was something close to it. Marcus spoke from the front seat about halfway through the drive. "You said you didn't fully understand what you were building when you designed the protocols." "That's right," Maya said. "What did you think you were building?" She was quiet for a moment. "A better training system. The existing K9 conditioning for classified operations had a failure rate in high-stress urban environments. Dogs breaking discipline at critical moments because the conditioning hadn't accounted for crowd acoustics, chemical interference, handler separation." She watched the landscape pass. "I was 20 years old and I thought I was solving a problem." "What were you actually building?" "Animals that could be controlled by a single command authority, even in compromised operational environments. Animals with no independent judgment. No self-preservation override." Her voice stayed flat because flatness was the only way to say it without the weight of it becoming something she couldn't manage in a moving vehicle. "In the wrong hands, they're not military working dogs anymore. They're weapons that don't know they're weapons." Marcus absorbed that. "And Voss wants to sell that to someone. Voss wants to sell the blueprint. The dogs are the proof of concept." She looked at Rex. "Every animal from the Phoenix program is a demonstration that it works. You show a buyer 14 highly conditioned military K9 units responding to a single handler, without resistance, without hesitation, across any environment, and you've just made the program worth whatever number you want to put on it. How do we stop the sale? We take the dogs back. Simple. Absolute. Without the animals, the blueprint is theory. Nobody buys theory at that price point. The colonel's phone buzzed again. He looked at the screen, and this time he didn't say anything immediately, which was worse than anything he could have said. What? Maya asked. Garrow, the colonel said. He's been found. Alive. A beat too long before he answered. Yes. At the Virginia facility perimeter, he was released. The colonel's expression was carefully controlled. He has a message. Verbal. He says Voss told him to deliver it to Phoenix 1 directly. The vehicle was very quiet. Say it, Maya said. The colonel read from his phone screen. The dogs remember you. So do I. Come alone or the buyer takes delivery tonight, Rex growled. Low and sustained, the kind of sound that came from somewhere deeper than training. Marcus turned around in his seat and looked at Maya with the expression of someone who already knew the answer to the question he was about to ask, but needed to ask it anyway. You're not going alone. He said come alone. He also stole 14 military dogs and put 2 federal agents in a hospital. His terms don't mean anything. His terms mean he's scared, Maya said. If he wasn't scared of what I can do, he wouldn't need the condition. She looked at the colonel. He knows that if I walk into that facility with your team, the dogs will respond to me over him. He loses control of the entire asset in one moment. She paused. He needs me isolated, so that doesn't happen in front of witnesses. Then we don't let you go isolated, Price said. We don't have a choice about what I do, Maya said quietly. Not aggressive, just factual. You need the dogs. The dogs respond to me, and Voss will move the buyer timeline up the moment he sees a federal vehicle within a quarter mile of that facility. She looked at the colonel. You position your team at distance. I go in. Rex comes with me. Rex is one animal against whatever Voss has inside, Marcus said. Rex isn't going in as backup, Maya said. He's going in as communication. The moment the other Phoenix dogs hear Rex, they'll respond. Voss loses control of the kennel immediately. She held the colonel's gaze. I've been thinking about this since the depot. It's the only approach that works within the timeline. The colonel studied her for a long moment. And if Voss has armed personnel inside? He does, she said. He definitely does. She said it without hesitation and without pretending it wasn't a problem, and without offering false reassurance about how it would resolve. She had been in enough real situations to know that false reassurance was the most useless thing one person could offer another. Marcus, she said, when we reach the facility perimeter, I need you to do something for me. Name it. If this goes wrong inside, you pull the colonel's team back. You don't send anyone in after me. Marcus stared at her. That's not something I'm agreeing to. It's not a request, she said. If the operation collapses and Voss still has the dog sending a federal team in costs lives and accomplishes nothing, the only outcome that matters is getting those animals out of his control. And what about you? Maya looked out the window, then back at Marcus. And for just a moment, for the first time since the diner, the operational calm she had been wearing like a second uniform shifted slightly, and underneath it was something real and tired and 22 years old. I've been hiding for 3 years, she said. I'm done hiding. Rex pressed his head against her arm one more time. The vehicle turned onto the access road that led toward the decommissioned naval annex. And somewhere inside that building, 14 dogs that Maya Hartwell had trained, conditioned, and cared for were waiting in the dark, not knowing help was coming, only knowing the scent they had been built to trust wasn't anywhere near them yet. That was about to change. The access code worked on the first try. Maya had half expected it not to. She had half hoped it wouldn't, because a rejected code would have meant the facility had been properly decommissioned, and whatever was inside had nothing to do with the naval infrastructure she once knew. But the panel accepted the sequence without hesitation. The lock disengaged with a clean mechanical click, and the door opened into darkness, and the specific smell of kenneled animals and recycled air. And underneath both of those things, the faint chemical trace of Phoenix conditioning compound the proprietary scent marker embedded into every training session she had ever run. Rex's entire body went rigid beside her. Then, from somewhere deep inside the facility, an answering sound. Not one dog. Multiple. A cascade of low, restless movement traveling through the dark like a current finding ground. They knew she was here. Maya stepped inside. She kept her breathing even, and her footsteps quiet, and her right hand loose at her side, not reaching for the sidearm the colonel had pressed on her before she left the vehicle. Not yet, but aware of it the way she was aware of everything in operational environments as a fact that existed and might become relevant and would be acted on without hesitation if it did. Rex moved beside her. His shoulder brushed her leg with every other step. Contact. Orientation. The two of them navigating the same dark, the same way they had navigated everything since the diner that morning together without needing to discuss it. The sound from the kennels grew. Still not barking. Still that particular controlled vocalization of Phoenix-trained animals, disciplined enough not to break into full alarm, but vocal enough to communicate. 14 individual animals recognizing something that overrode 3 years of separation and 3 weeks of a different handler's commands. A light came on ahead of her. Not overhead lighting. A single lamp positioned at eye level, the deliberate illumination of someone who wanted to be seen clearly and wanted to see her clearly. Daniel Voss was leaner than she remembered. 3 years had done something to his face that wasn't entirely about age. He stood at the far end of the corridor with his hands at his sides and his posture straight, and his expression carrying the particular quality of a man who had been certain about his choices for so long that certainty had replaced everything else. He was alone, visibly, which meant he wasn't alone. "You came," he said. "You knew I would," Maya said. "I hoped." He looked at Rex. Something moved in his expression when he saw the dog. Not quite recognition, something more complicated than that. "He found you." He did. I always said the scent conditioning was the most durable element of the program. Outlasts everything else. Outlasts the handler relationship. Outlasts reassignment. Outlasts time. He looked back at her. "You proved it by running, and he proved it by finding you." "I didn't run," she said. The same thing she had said to the colonel. She meant it the same way she had meant it then, which was to say she meant it about 60%, and the other 40% was something she hadn't finished working out yet. Voss smiled slightly. "What would you call it? Withdrawal from an operation I couldn't ethically continue. The program saved lives. The program created animals with no self-determination and sold the methodology to people who wanted to replicate that in other contexts." Her voice stayed level. "You know what I found in the procurement requests during the last operational phase. You know why I left." Voss was quiet for a moment. "The program was going to be redirected. I didn't have control over that. So instead of fighting it, you waited 3 years and decided to sell it yourself. I decided to ensure it went to someone with a specific operational framework, rather than a committee of people who would fragment it into something unrecognizable." He took one step forward. Rex's weight shifted against Maya's leg. "There's a difference between selling a weapon and placing a weapon." "That's a distinction that sounds important until you look at where it lands," Maya said. "Who's the buyer, Daniel?" Silence. From the kennels, the sound of movement again. Closer this time. One of the animals had shifted position, and the sound had a specific quality that Maya recognized immediately, a dog repositioning to face a direction. Facing her. Harlow. She was almost certain it was Harlow. "The buyer is a private security consortium operating under a legitimate defense contract," Voss said. "They have federal authorization for K-9 operational programs. This is legal. The Phoenix dogs aren't covered under standard federal K-9 authorization, and you know that. Their conditioning falls outside every documented training protocol because we deliberately kept it outside the documentation." Maya held his gaze. You're not placing a weapon. You're selling a classified military asset to a private entity without authorization. That's not a gray area, Daniel. That's a federal crime carrying 25 years minimum. Voss studied her for a long moment. Something in his expression changed, not softening, recalculating. You came here to talk me out of it. I came here to get the dogs. I can't let you do that. I know. The silence stretched for 2 full seconds. Then Voss made a small gesture with his left hand. Not dramatic, almost conversational. And from the 2 doorways flanking the corridor, 4 men stepped out. Tactical gear, weapons raised, professionals. The kind of personnel that didn't come cheap and didn't ask questions about the legal architecture of their employment. Rex growled. Deep, sustained. Maya didn't move. She looked at Voss over the barrels of 4 weapons with the specific stillness of someone who had already anticipated this exact moment and had decided before it arrived how she was going to respond to it. You're not going to shoot me, she said. I don't want to, Voss said. But I need you to understand that I cannot allow this operation to be compromised at the final stage. The buyer is already here, Maya said. It wasn't a question. Voss's expression confirmed it before he spoke. They've been here for 2 hours. The transfer was supposed to be complete before you arrived. He glanced at one of his men. Someone moved the timeline. Someone on the colonel's team told you we found the depot, Maya said. Same person told you we were coming here. But they told you too late to finish the transfer before I arrived. She paused. Which means whoever your contact inside the colonel's team is, they're running their own timeline, not yours. Voss's jaw tightened by 1 degree. What do you mean? I mean, your inside contact didn't slow us down to give you time to complete the sale. They slowed us down just enough to put me in the same building as the buyer at the same time. Maya let that sit for exactly 1 second. Someone wants this transaction witnessed. The sound from the kennels changed. Not louder. Different. The shift from restless movement to focused attention. 14 animals all orienting to the same point simultaneously, a sound that anyone who hadn't spent months inside a Phoenix training facility would not have been able to interpret. Maya interpreted it immediately. Someone had entered the kennel area from the secondary access. Daniel, she said quietly, your buyer didn't come here to complete a purchase. One of Voss's men pressed a finger to his earpiece. His expression changed. He turned toward Voss. Sir, movement at the secondary kennel entrance. It's not our personnel. Voss looked at Maya. For the first time, something in his certainty cracked. What did you do? Nothing, she said honestly. I think your contact just did it for me. The facility's main power cut out. Total darkness for exactly 3 seconds. Rex barked once, sharp and commanding, and from the kennels the response was immediate and overwhelming. 14 Phoenix-trained animals erupting into coordinated vocalization. Not panic, not random alarm. The specific response pattern she had built into their conditioning 3 years ago. The pattern that meant handler present, threat detected, awaiting command. The backup lighting came on. Dim. Red-tinted emergency illumination that turned the corridor into something that looked like the inside of a decision that had gone badly wrong. 2 of Voss's men had moved. Not toward Maya. Away from her. Toward the secondary entrance where the sound of boots on concrete was now clearly audible. Fast boots. Multiple. Coming from inside the facility, not outside it. And then from the far end of the corridor, not where Voss was standing, from the junction behind him, a voice. Federal agents. Nobody move. Price. Maya stared down the corridor. Price stepped into the emergency lighting with 2 other agents flanking him, weapons drawn, tactical vests, the complete operational posture of someone who had not been waiting at the perimeter. Voss spun around. How did you get inside? Emergency access override, Price said calmly. Naval facility. Federal authorization. He looked at Voss's men. Weapons down. All of you. Now. 3 of the 4 men complied immediately, the particular rapid compliance of hired personnel, calculating consequences in real time, and reaching the obvious conclusion. The 4th hesitated for 1 second, which was 1 second too long, and Rex moved before anyone else in the corridor had fully processed that the animal was moving. The German Shepherd covered the distance in under 2 seconds, and the man's weapon hit the floor a half second before the man himself did Rex's controlled takedown, precise and absolute, and completely without excess, the way Phoenix animals were trained to operate, maximum effect, minimum duration. "Rex, halt," Maya said. The dog released, stepped back, sat. The man on the floor didn't move. Voss looked at Maya, then at Price, then back at Maya. The recalculation happening in his expression was visible and rapid, and was arriving at a conclusion he clearly had not prepared for. "You didn't know Price was coming," Voss said to Maya. It wasn't an accusation. It was a man trying to understand what had actually just happened to him. "No," Maya said. "Then who?" Price crossed the corridor and took Voss by the arm with practiced efficiency. "Colonel Dex would like a word," he said. "Outside, now." "The buyer," Voss said. "They're still in the secondary facility." "They were in the secondary facility," Price said. "Past tense. We have them." He looked at Maya over his shoulder. "The Colonel's inside contact flagged the buyer's arrival to us directly. Separate channel from whatever they were feeding Voss." He paused. Turns out the leak wasn't working for Voss. They were working for Naval Criminal Investigative Service. 18-month undercover operation. Voss was never the primary target. The silence that followed was the kind that happened when the shape of a situation revealed itself to be entirely different from what everyone inside it had understood it to be. "The buyer," Maya said. "International private military contractor with connections to 3 ongoing federal investigations across 2 continents," Price said. Voss was the bait. The buyer was the objective. He looked at Voss, whose expression had moved through several stages very quickly, and arrived at something that looked like a man understanding that he had been operated against from the beginning. The NCIS operation needed the sale to reach completion in a monitored environment with federal witnesses present. That's why the timeline kept shifting. They needed everyone in the same building. Voss said nothing. The certainty was entirely gone from his face now. What remained was older and quieter, and more honest. Marcus's voice came through on the colonel's radio that Price was carrying. "We've got the buyer's team secured outside. Colonel wants to know status inside." Price keyed the radio. "Secure. Bringing Voss out now." He moved toward the exit with Voss and 2 agents. The other 2 agents began securing the remaining personnel in the corridor. Maya didn't move toward the exit. She turned toward the kennel door. "Hartwell," Price said from behind her. "We need to move out." "1 minute," she said. She pushed the kennel door open. The sound hit her first. 14 animals responding simultaneously, not to the door opening to her. The specific scent recognition response she had spent 14 months conditioning into each of them. The response that didn't fade with time or distance, or different handlers, or 3 years of someone else's commands. She stood in the doorway, and she didn't say anything for a moment. The dogs were in individual kennels along both walls. Every single one of them was facing her. Every single one of them was sitting in the formal attention position. Not because they had been commanded to, because that was what Phoenix animals did when they recognized command authority. They waited. Rex moved past her into the kennel and walked slowly down the center. His posture easy, his pace unhurried, and as he passed each kennel, the dog inside made a sound, soft individual, the animal equivalent of acknowledgement. One after another, down the length of the room and back. Maya watched him. Her throat was tight in a way she wasn't going to examine too closely right now. She walked to the 3rd kennel on the left. A female shepherd, golden brown and black, a little leaner than she should have been, her dark eyes fixed on Maya's face with an attention so complete it was almost painful to look at directly. PHX-07, Harlow. Maya crouched in front of the kennel door. "Hey, girl." The dog pressed her nose against the gate. Maya unlatched it. Harlow stepped out carefully. The slight caution of an animal that had learned not to move too fast in unfamiliar situations, and then she walked the 2 steps between them and pressed her entire head against Maya's chest and held it there. Maya put both arms around the dog and stayed very still. From the doorway, Price watched and said nothing, because even federal agents who had been running undercover operations for 18 months understood that some moments required exactly nothing from anyone except the presence to witness them. Rex came back down the center of the kennel and sat beside Maya and Harlow without being called. 3 animals. 1 moment. The weight of everything that had led to this room settling into something that wasn't resolved yet, not entirely, but was at least present instead of buried. Maya stood up. Harlow stayed beside her right leg. Rex stayed beside her left. She looked down the row of 13 remaining kennels, and then she looked at Price. "All of them come with us," she said. "That's going to be a logistical challenge," Price said. "Then we'll work it out," she said. "But none of them stay here." Price looked at the 2 rows of attentive waiting animals. Then he keyed his radio. "Colonel, we're going to need additional transport." A pause. "Yes, sir. All 14. Maya walked to the next kennel. One by one, she opened the doors. One by one, the Phoenix dogs came out and took their positions around her, calm and deliberate, and without any confusion about where they were supposed to be. Because they had always known. They had just been waiting for her to come back and open the doors. The parking lot outside the Naval Annex looked nothing like a victory. 14 dogs, 6 federal vehicles, a buyer's team in zip restraints sitting along the outer fence line. Voss standing beside a federal transport with his hands cuffed in front of him, his expression the particular blank of a man who had run out of recalculations and was now simply waiting to find out what came next. Colonel Dex stood near the lead vehicle with his phone pressed to his ear and the posture of a man receiving information that required him to remain very still. Marcus was leaning against the second vehicle crutch, resting against the door, watching Maya move the last 3 dogs from the building's secondary exit with the quiet attention of someone who had spent the last 4 hours revising his understanding of what a 22-year-old woman was capable of. Maya came out with Harlow beside her right leg and Rex beside her left, and the third animal, PHX-11, a large male shepherd who had been the most difficult of the 14 to condition and the most loyal once the conditioning held walking close behind. She crossed the lot and stopped near Marcus. She looked at the buyer's team along the fence, then at Voss, then at the colonel still on his phone. "How bad is it?" Marcus asked. "It's over," she said. "That's what matters." "Is it, though?" He said it gently without the rising inflection of a question, the way someone said something when they already knew the answer wasn't simple. Maya didn't respond immediately. She watched Price hand a document case to a second federal agent who had arrived in the last 20 minutes, someone she didn't recognize, someone whose credentials had made even the colonel straighten slightly. NCIS, Senior Investigator. The kind of rank that showed up when an operation had concluded and the accounting was about to begin. "The buyer," she said. "Who are they connected to?" "Colonel hasn't said directly." Marcus shifted his weight. "But I heard Price on the radio about 20 minutes ago. He said the consortium had active contracts in 4 countries. One of them wasn't friendly." Maya looked at the buyer's team again. 8 people. Professional bearing even in restraints. None of them were talking. None of them were making eye contact with the federal agents moving around them. The disciplined silence of people who had legal representation on speed dial and knew exactly how to behave when an operation collapsed. "They'll walk," she said. "Maybe not all of them. The people who actually built the network will walk." She said it without bitterness because bitterness required surprise, and she wasn't surprised. She had been inside enough classified operations to understand that the people with the most exposure and the least culpability were always the ones who got processed and released, and the people with the most culpability were always the ones with enough infrastructure around them to manage the consequences. "Voss will take the full weight of it." "Voss made his choices," Marcus said. "He did." She paused. That doesn't make it clean. The colonel ended his call and walked toward her. His expression had settled into something she read immediately, the specific expression of a senior official who was about to deliver information that he had shaped carefully before delivery. Because some of it was good and some of it was complicated, and he wanted her to receive both parts in the right order. The buyer's primary operative has already requested federal immunity in exchange for testimony against the consortium's international network, the colonel said. NCIS is inclined to accept. Of course they are, Maya said. It means 12 additional arrests across 3 jurisdictions within the next 72 hours. People significantly higher up the chain than anyone in this parking lot. He held her gaze. That matters. I know it matters. She looked at the dogs positioned around her. What happens to them? The colonel was quiet for one beat too long. Tell me, she said. NCIS wants to evaluate the Phoenix animals for potential reassignment to active federal K-9 programs. Reassignment, Maya said flatly, with appropriate behavioral assessment and recertification under standard federal protocols. Standard federal protocols. She kept her voice level with effort. You understand what that means for animals conditioned under Phoenix. You can't run standard federal recertification on dogs trained under a completely different command architecture. You'd have to strip the conditioning first, and stripping Phoenix conditioning isn't a 2-week process. It's months of careful behavioral work, or you end up with animals that are confused and unreliable and dangerous. I understand that. Does NCIS understand that? The colonel's expression gave her the answer. Maya looked at Harlow. The dog was watching her with that complete, patient attention. Not anxious, not uncertain. Just present, waiting, trusting that whatever happened next would be guided by the same judgment that had opened her kennel door an hour ago. That trust was the thing that settled something in Maya's chest into absolute clarity. I'll write the recertification protocol, she said. The colonel blinked. Maya. Full behavioral transition program. Animal by animal. Timeline methodology documentation. She looked at him directly. I built these dogs. I know exactly what they need to be safe in a different operational environment. And I am the only person alive who can write that protocol accurately, because Voss's documentation was designed to be sold, not implemented. And every other person who worked the original Phoenix program is either dead retired or in federal custody. She paused. You need me to do this. The colonel studied her for a long moment. That's a minimum 6-month commitment. I know. It would require formal reinstatement. I know that too. The immunity arrangement covers your disappearance. The reinstatement is a separate conversation. Then let's have it, she said. Today, before anyone in a building in Washington decides what to do with 14 animals that they don't understand. Marcus made a sound beside her. Not a word, just the quiet exhale of a man watching something click into place that had been moving toward this position for hours, maybe longer. The colonel looked at Rex, then at Harlow, then at the 11 other Phoenix animals arranged in a loose arc around Maya, not commanded to stay close, simply staying close, because that was where their conditioning pointed and had always pointed. 6 months minimum, he said. Full documentation. Complete behavioral transition program for every animal. Yes. And at the end of it, NCIS takes custody of the recertified animals. Maya was quiet for 2 seconds. At the end of it, the animals go where they can operate safely and be handled properly. If NCIS can demonstrate they have qualified handlers for Phoenix transitioned K-9 units, then yes. She looked at Rex. But Rex stays with Marcus. Marcus looked up sharply. What? He found me because you followed him. That means he was already working with you. That relationship doesn't get filed into a federal program. She looked at Marcus directly. He needs a handler who understands what he is. You've been operating with him for 18 months without knowing his full classification. You've managed it correctly by instinct. She paused. That's not nothing. Not, Marcus looked at Rex for a long moment. The dog looked back at him with the same patient attention he gave everyone. But there was something underneath it, the particular ease of an animal that had spent enough time with a specific person to have formed something that the conditioning hadn't manufactured and couldn't replicate. "He picked you before he found me," Maya said quietly. "That matters." Marcus looked back at her. His jaw was tight in a way that had nothing to do with disagreement. "You're sure?" "Yes." The colonel's phone buzzed again. He looked at it, then at Maya. "NCIS senior investigator wants a statement, now before the transport leaves. Tell her I'll be there in 2 minutes." The colonel nodded and walked back toward the lead vehicle. Price appeared at Maya's elbow. He held out a folded document. "Temporary reinstatement authorization. Colonel pre-signed it an hour ago." He looked faintly embarrassed. "He was reasonably confident you'd agree." Maya took the document. She looked at it for a moment without opening it. "He was confident," she said, "or he was hoping." "Bit of both," Price said honestly. Then he walked away. Marcus watched her hold the document. "How does it feel? Complicated," she said. "Complicated good or complicated bad?" She thought about that. She thought about 3 years in Millhaven. 3 years of morning shifts and parking lot silences, and the slow, careful construction of a life designed to be invisible and forgettable. She thought about sitting in her car every morning before work, staring at the steering wheel, preparing herself to walk into a world she told herself she belonged to now. She had never believed it. Not once in 3 years had she walked into that diner and felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. She had felt safe. She had felt hidden. Those were not the same thing as belonging, and somewhere inside the part of herself she had been most disciplined about not examining, she had known that the entire time. "Both," she said finally. Marcus nodded. He understood that. "What happens after the 6 months?" "I don't know." She looked toward the horizon. The morning had aged into something brighter and warmer, the kind of light that came after a long night and felt almost aggressively optimistic. "I stopped planning past the next shift for 3 years. I can probably manage 6 months." Marcus almost smiled. "That's not exactly a life strategy." "No," she agreed. "It isn't." Harlow pressed against her leg. Rex from Marcus's side of the vehicle turned his head toward Maya with that look, the one that wasn't quite a command and wasn't quite a question, but was something that lived in the space between them. The specific communication of an animal that had tracked her across 3 years and 200 miles, and a diner full of strangers, and a federal operation, and a dark corridor with 4 weapons pointed at her, and had come out the other side of all of it, still oriented to her voice, her scent, her presence. She walked to the NCIS investigator and gave her statement. She was direct and specific, and she did not hedge, and she did not omit, and she did not perform the particular performance of someone trying to manage how they were perceived. She simply said what happened, and what she knew, and what she had done, and why. It took 11 minutes. When she was finished, the investigator looked at her for a moment, with an expression that was professional, and also underneath the professionalism, something that might have been respect. "The colonel tells me you've agreed to write the behavioral transition protocol for the Phoenix animals," the investigator said. "Yes." "That's a significant commitment for someone who spent 3 years trying to walk away from this program." "I didn't walk away from the dogs," Maya said. "I walked away from the people making decisions about them." She held the investigator's gaze. "The dogs were never the problem." The investigator nodded slowly. "We'll be in touch about the formal arrangement." She paused. "For what it's worth, what you did today prevented a classified military program from being weaponized by a private entity with documented connections to hostile intelligence networks." She said it simply, without ceremony. "That matters." Maya accepted that without deflecting it and without inflating it. It mattered. She knew it mattered. She had known from the moment Rex pressed his nose to her sleeve in the diner that whatever came next was going to matter, and she had walked toward it anyway. That was the part she was still working out how to feel about. She walked back to where Marcus was waiting. The federal transport with Voss inside had already moved. The buyer's team was being loaded into a second transport. The lot was clearing with the efficient purposefulness of an operation wrapping toward documentation and process, and the long, unglamorous, institutional work that followed moments like this one. Marcus handed her a coffee. She had no idea where he had gotten it. She didn't ask. "So," he said. "So," she said. 6 months. At least. He looked at Rex, who was sitting beside his left leg with the crutch resting against his shoulder, and his dark eyes moving calmly around the clearing lot. "You know, when I walked into that diner this morning, I was just looking for breakfast. How was the coffee? Never actually finished it. Sorry about that." He shook his head. Not an absolution. Just an acknowledgement that some mornings went differently than planned, and that was not always a bad thing. Harlow pressed her head against Maya's hand. Maya looked down at her. The dog's eyes were soft and steady, and completely without confusion about where she was, or who she was with, or what came next. That trust again. That absolute, uncomplicated trust. Maya had spent 3 years trying to become someone who didn't carry the weight of what that trust meant. Someone lighter, someone simpler, someone who could pour coffee and smile, and go home at the end of a shift, without the particular heaviness of knowing she had built something that mattered, and then walked away from it. She understood now, standing in a clearing federal lot with 14 Phoenix dogs and a veteran she had met 4 hours ago, and a 6-month commitment written on a folded document in her jacket pocket, that she had never actually put the weight down. She had just stopped acknowledging she was carrying it. "Ready?" Marcus asked. Maya looked at the dogs. All 14. Sitting. Waiting. Patient and certain, and pointed toward her like 14 compasses that had only ever known one north. She straightened her shoulders. "Yes," she said. And Maya Hartwell, who had once been Phoenix 1, who had run for 3 years and been found in under an hour by a dog that never forgot her, who had walked into a dark facility alone and come back out with every animal she had ever trained, took the first step toward the vehicle. Rex fell into stride on her left, Harlow on her right. Behind them, in a loose and easy column, 12 more Phoenix dogs followed without being commanded, without hesitation, without a single animal uncertain about the direction they were moving. Because she was moving, and they had always been hers. And now, finally, she had stopped pretending otherwise. Phoenix 1 had come home, and this time she was not running.